And now, marine weather around Alaska. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your marine weather outlook for Alaska coming up here to close out this week and start the weekend. We quick take a look here at the sea ice, and there has been a little bit of development between Utqiagvik back through Kaktovik along the Beaufort Sea coastline. Also some ice developing along the Russian Arctic coastline, the west side of the Chukchi Sea. And as we would expect now, new ice formation will continue as we move along through October and we start to see colder air develop there across the Arctic regions and far north. As for weather systems, later tonight, early Friday morning, we have an area of low pressure north of Cold Bay out over the southeast Bering with what is left of a front that came up along the Gulf Coast and then has pushed inland. And by early Friday morning, we expect accumulating snows in areas of the southeast interior, including parts of the Copper River Basin, Alaska Range, and on up through Tanana, through Fairbanks, 40-mile Gold Country. 1 to 3 inches of snow may fall up that way. In the lower elevations, higher elevations, 6 inches of snow could fall around the eastern Alaska Range. By Friday, things quieted down along the Gulf, still some lingering showers and areas of rain. Low is still here over the southeast Bering, but weakening. Still brisk winds, though, out of the northeast here along the outer areas of the Yukon coastline and St. Lawrence Island. There is going to be another area of low pressure come up out of the North Pacific and then kind of pull back to the northwest, just off of the Panhandle coast as we go into Saturday. This system will bring another round of at least moderate rains to the Panhandle, along with some breezy conditions there as we go through Saturday into Saturday night. And that'll also tend to pull back some moisture in the colder air with some additional snow possible here across the southeast interior later on Saturday. But as far as marine interests are concerned, winds will be on Friday out of the southeast to south, 20 knots through the inner channels there of the Panhandle, with gusts as high as 35 knots Stevens Passage, as well as at Lynn Canal with waves maybe as high as 4 feet. The outer coast, look for south winds, 20-25 knots, higher gusts to 35 knots there off of Craig, but turning more toward the southeast, 10-15 knots west of Gustavus and outside of Yakutat Bay with waves around 10 feet. For Saturday, we expect winds along the inner channels to be southeast 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet, but the outer coast within 15 nautical miles of shore, southeasterly winds 20 to 30 knots, waves 10 to 12 feet. Turn more easterly once you get, as I say, south and west of Yakutat, with waves running 9 or 10 feet. Along the northwestern Gulf Coast, winds generally out of the southeast, including the lower portion, lower middle Cook Inlet. Winds 25 knots here at the entrance of Cook Inlet on up to off of Anchor Point with waves 5 to 7 feet. Southeast winds to 20 knots, 4-foot waves within Prince William Sound. And then northeast winds upper Cook Inlet. Waves there running a few feet. For Saturday, winds come down further, at least there through Prince William Sound. Northwest winds 15 knots, waves a couple of feet, 20-knot northwesterly winds with 6-foot waves off the Kenai coast. Look for northeast winds 15 to 20 knots down the length of Cook Inlet with waves 3 to perhaps as 5 feet here as you get down toward Kamashack Bay and the entrance of Cook Inlet. For Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, you can see the low circulation here north of Cold Bay, kind of tucked away in the southeast corner of the Bering and Bristol Bay. Winds ahead of it, south-southwest 25 knots on the North Pacific side, waves 7 to 9 feet, generally 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Saturday, winds come down further, kind of a mixed bag, variable winds around 10 knots on the east side of Kodiak Island off of Chitnik and Sand Point. Look for easterly winds, Prince Williams, are within Bristol Bay at 10 knots, 2-foot waves, variable winds, still that low circulation, and then north of Cold Bay, 15 knots with 5-foot waves. Friday, across the Aleutian chain, west-northwest winds, eastern central Aleutians, turning back to the northeast and east around 15 to 20 knots near and west of Kiska towards Shemya. And for Saturday, generally easterly winds at 15 knots across the eastern Aleutians, becoming northwesterly, central Aleutians westward at 20 knots. Waves generally running 5 to 7 feet on the North Pacific side and 5 to 8 feet on the Bering side. And along the southwest coast, out of Norton Sound and along the Yukon coastline, we still expect 35-knot northeasterly gales on Friday. And by the time we get into Saturday, those winds will start to come down. Still 25-knot northeasterly winds, though not as strong as what they have been this Thursday and again on Friday. And look for northeast winds, 25 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, 15 knots out of Bristol Bay. More of a northerly wind here. St. Matthew, 30 knots with 11-foot waves, and the Pribilof Islands, 20-knot north winds with waves running 7 feet in the open waters. And then for areas through and south of the Bering Strait, northeast winds to 30 knots, as high as 35 knots out of Norton Sound south of Nome. And on the north side of St. Lawrence at Gamble, waves 6 to as high as 10, 11 feet on the north side of St. Lawrence. As we go up along, further along the northwest Arctic coast, north winds to 15 knots, Point Ley to Utqiagvik, and then winds will become northwest to westerly, 15 to 25 knots over toward Kaktovik with waves of 4 to 6 feet. And on Saturday, winds along the Arctic coast will generally be northwest to west, 20 to as high as 30 knots there at Kaktovik with 7-foot waves. But as we drop down through the Chukchi Sea, winds will be out of the east-northeast, 20 to 25 knots, 25 to 35 or 25 to 30 knot northeasterly winds passing south of the Bering Strait, with waves 3 feet off of Wales and Port Clarence, but as high as 8 feet on the north side of St. Lawrence Island.